So today I finally get to mess with an SS180 engine.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
I found my dream scooter. It was late this summer when, through a friend, I found this Vespa 180 SuperSport hidden away on the East Coast. And my lovely wife surprised me when she said that I can go and pick it up. So thank you.
What about my VMB, dude?
When I picked the bike up, it didn't run. It had decent compression, so I thought, hey, I'd just give the carb a good clean and put some fresh gas in and it will just fire up. I discovered all these neat little intricacies that make the 180 SS what it is, like it being piston ported. But as soon as I had the intake off, it smelled terribly like varnish, which told me that I have to clean out and replace part of the entire fuel system. When I drained the oil from the engine, it was the same stench that came up from what wasn't even oil, it was just this slosh of old gas and oil, which told me, well, it's time for another project. So in preparation for this video, I took the entire engine apart and cleaned it up. So what we have here is a typical VSC1 engine. It is a mix of the old 50s cases and the very modern large frame cases. It has this really cool L-shaped swing arm with reinforcement. In typical 1960s Vespa fashion, the axle bearing was held in with a screw-in retainer. To get ready for assembly, we're first going to put in the crank bearing and then the rear axle bearing. So let's first clean everything up. And then put in our clutch side oil seal before we mount our bearing. With heated cases, we can just put a frozen down bearing, slide it into it, and with one or two gentle taps, it'll be right in place. For the rear axle, I cleaned up the threads before I heated the cases. And put the bearing in. I reused the old bearing, it was in really good shape, and it just needed a quick cleanup. The bearing retainer actually is left-hand thread, which was a little bit confusing in the beginning, and I used a dull chisel to just tap it back in place. I didn't have the right tool. With the oil seal in place, I could move on to the safety clip. I don't know how to describe this, it just helps the retainer to stay in place. You get the idea, right? When we look at the flywheel side of the engine cases, we can see the typical 1960s Piaggio leathers that are cast into the cases. But we also see this little scratch here, which kind of shows that this engine has seen some shit before. So let's get going. I already put the outer bearing in. What I really like is like this T5 or small frame style bearing. I'm really happy that the selector rod bearing was still good and really good shape, because those things are freaking expensive, like so many other parts for this bike. What's interesting is the flywheel side bearing needs a lot of grease. Because it is enclosed with oil seals on both sides of the bearing, you need to pack the crap out of that bearing, because lubrication really is an issue. With the oil seal in place there, it is time to get to the gearbox. I start with the primary, and on this engine, the primary itself is also very specific. It is different from large frames in terms of how it's supported in its bearings. With the axle bearing heated up, the drive shaft just falls in as I put it in the freezer before. Tightening down the primary, I was very cautious, as I know large frame engines have problems there that they can break. So I made sure everything is tip-top in place and used the original fold-up lock washer. The cruciform was in really good shape, so I did not touch anything on there. The gearbox, starting with 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and finally 1st gear, just really fell into place. All I had to do is clean off the grime of varnished gas and oil that was on it. Next up is the crankshaft. What I really like about this setup, there is no rotary pad as the intake's directly on the cylinder. So there really isn't many tolerances you need to pay attention at between crankshaft and cases. If you watch the crankshaft close here, I use a puller tool to pull it into place without using much force. With everything in place where it belongs, it is now time to put our engine case gasket on and then close it up. So initially I thought putting the Kickstarter gear on first would make life easier, as I usually do when I put a large frame engine together. However, I was struggling hard. It took me a couple attempts and I had to move the Kickstarter gear into the flywheel side. You're kidding me, right? And it just kind of fell all together. One of the really cool things about this engine are these safety tabs that go under the bolts. So there's no real lock washers, it's these fold up style lock washers that hold everything in place. The clutch of an SS is also a quite special little thing. It has 6 springs and 3 plates. It is not just slid onto the crankshaft, but it is pressed on by bolting it onto this cone, which means that if you want to remove it, you need a special puller tool to get it off. I was glad that I found one stateside. The clutch smelled of varnish, so I ordered a clutch rebuild kit and wanted to put new plates into it. And boy was I right, because they stink. Oof. But that means we can have some fun with them, because they're soaked in gas. Having aligned the springs with the bottom plate, I got new clutch corks and put them back together. With everything nice and oiled up, I use SA30, especially on this engine because it uses a lot of brass bushings. I put them in a bag with a little bit of oil to make sure that we are ready to go when it's time to put it together. Before mounting the clutch, we need to put in this special washer that's very specific for GS and SS engines. And then we can basically press on our clutch by bolting it onto the crankshaft cone. After everything is torqued down properly, I can put in my pressure plate and get ready to put the cover on. The clutch cover is also slightly different in arm shape. I think it is due to the shape of the swing arm. But I also really, really like this splash guard. It protects the carburetor from all sorts of grime. Sometimes I wonder why they got rid of these. This cover really just looks cool with the splash guard and the Piaggio logo. The design of the rear hub, especially the brake backplate, comes close to what you see nowadays in large frame engines. I wasn't sure if the backplate was repainted, but I wanted to keep the patina look, so I used Overtrol paint conditioner to inhibit the rust and make it not deteriorate any further, but still keep that little grimy look. The brake shoes actually look good to me, so I resurfaced them and mounted them in the same way than I do on any other large frame engine, which is with a lot of pulling, force and cursing. Before mounting the hub, it takes this little brass cone that goes on the axle, and then you can mount the hub. I sandblasted the hub as the paint flaked off, and then treated it with penetrating oil. The same style cone washer goes on the other side, and it keeps everything nice and neat in place. Mounting the cylinder was really excited because I got a good look on what really is going on. So you got this 3-bolt intake mount, and you can see it goes directly into the cylinder. So your intake timings are all just directed by piston. There are no ports in the cases, so really there isn't. It's very simple. It's just a gasket, a cylinder, got that piston in there, and boom, you're done. And no, even despite my bait and switch, there at the beginning I did not touch the cylinder with a Dremel. It is really hard to come by these parts, so I wanted to have it keep it so. With that done, I think we're done for today, and next time we're going to move on to ignition, and we're doing a 12-volt conversion with a Vespatronic. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I really enjoy building this bike, as it is like the unicorn, the one that I always wanted. So Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the next video. Really do tune in, because you will see some SS180 respectively dank wheelies.